Morning everybody, Arky Rick here, Arky Homesteader. It's a foggy morning here in Arkansas, and I was just thinking about some of you folks that would like to become homesteaders. My wife and I years ago decided that we were going to move out into the country, and it really didn't start out as per se homesteading. We just wanted to move out into the country. Didn't have a lot of money, but we were able to buy on land contract 5 wooded acres out in farm country. And we put a small down payment on it, and the homeowner financed it, and we made payments on it. That was back in 2005, I believe. And we owned the land. We were buying the land for just a year or so, and we put our house up for sale and sold it, and moved out here on the property in a 29-foot camper, and that's what we lived in. There wasn't anything else on the property except for this camper, and we started living in it. I was working. I was in construction, and she was a realtor. Now both of us were in our 50s. And, it was quite a big adventure for us. But we liked the country, and we've always lived in the country off and on through our lives. And we decided that this is where we were going to make our homestead. Anyway, things you need to think about. First thing you need to do is acquire the property. There's many ways of doing it. Like I said, we bought ours landowner financing, and what that means is the landowner sold us, he financed the property, and we made payments to him. We made a small $3,000 down payment. That's not small to a lot of folks, but that's what we did. We put $3,000 on it, and we started making about $345 payments. We financed it for 15 years. Anyway, you can do that. There's many ways, maybe you can get a loan even buy the property. That's a little tricky to do nowadays. A lot of banks don't want to lend on just property. But anyway, you need to find your property. That's the first thing. So then you need shelter. So what are you going to use for shelter? Some of you folks that have the finances can start building a home, or some of you can buy a camper. And people that don't have any money, it's going to be hard. If you got children, it'll be a lot harder. But if you're a single couple, a young couple or a single person, might be a little easier for you to rough it. I've known people that actually lived in tents until they got things going well enough to build some kind of shelter. Like I said, the first thing you need to do is get shelter. Then you need to think about a water source. You could be on the grid, or you could be off the grid. Off the grid's harder, but that's the way some people want to do it. My advice, if you're thinking of homesteading, is don't think you're going to go there completely broke and do it. It's hard. My wife and I worked for a few years. After we moved on to the property, I worked for 8 years and she worked for 2. And then I retired after 8 years. And, we made money, and as we made money, we invested it into the homestead. And the first thing we did is we built a house. And it was a small house, 1,600 square feet. But we were able to finally move into it out of the camper, and then we sold the camper. And we used that money to put back into the homestead. Now, after we pretty much got ourselves a place to live, we were lucky enough that we had rural water here and electric, and I hooked everything up. I built the house myself. My son helped me. And, we moved into the place. To be honest with you, it's still not finished. The inside needs some, finish work, and we get to it when we can. But then first thing animals we got were chickens. We always wanted chickens. So we built you got to build a shelter for them. And we first let them free range around the house. And that was kind of cool and it was neat, but you're always searching for their eggs because they hide their eggs everywhere. God, you can find them under a tree or under a basket or under a table. You never know. And one thing that about free-ranging chickens that we didn't like was they pooped around the house and then you track it into the house. So we finally put a pen up around them and we keep them in there. And then we eventually got goats and then cattle. We've had pigs. We've raised pigs and then had them butchered, and then we had more meat and we know what to do with. And we did the same thing with a cow. Any kind of livestock you have, don't think that you're just going to graze them out in the pasture and that's all you got to do. You have to pay attention to them. You have to make sure you got fresh water. You got to make sure they have, when they have pasture, that's good. And they can live on that. But in the wintertime, you're going to have to grain them and give them hay. So that's going to cost you money. We grow gardens, and we can. And, we try to supplement our food that way. And we can, well, this year we've canned 80 quarts of vegetables. And I've grown some squash, so we have some spaghetti squash in storage. I grew some field corn, and I use that to supplement my feed bill through the winter. Because, to feed 15 chickens, that could cost you $30 a month in feed from a feed store. So we supplement that with kitchen scraps and stuff. We have a little bucket we keep in the kitchen. And, any kind of stuff that you throw away that's edible for the animals, we give it to the chickens. And boy, they just love it. And we also give them grass clippings and that kind of thing, so that helps. And to be honest with you, I don't know if you could raise chickens cheap enough for the eggs that you could actually buy the eggs cheaper than it would cost you to buy the feed. But we like fresh eggs, and that's good. And occasionally we butcher a chicken too. And, I just like the sound. You might have heard it a few times, the roosters, and it's kind of country sounding, and we like it. And we like animals anyway, so sometimes the cost is worth it to us. But we do try to supplement that as best we can with things out of the garden, grass clippings, and growing my own field corn. And, it costs money to raise animals. Now, we have made a little money on occasion by selling a pig or selling a cow or selling goats, but the market's way down on pigs right now, so you can't make a lot of money on pig. It costs more to feed a pig than you'll ever make out of it, unless you're raising it to butcher, and then there is some benefit to that. Cattle it's a good investment. You can make some money on it, but it takes a long time. We've got some cows that we bought as weaned calves, and they are 2 years old now, and they just had their first babies. So it takes a while, but it's cool, and we enjoy doing it. And eventually, I hope to have a big enough herd that when I need a little money, I can sell a cow. I have supplemental income here now. I am retired, and we're living off of just our Social Security. But we try to make a little extra. My wife does crafts, and I have a sawmill, which is right there. I don't know if you can see it, but I make a little extra money with that sawmill. Now, I bought that sawmill when I first moved here with the idea of just making my own lumber for building my own buildings. And then after I retired, I thought, hey, maybe I could get people to bring their logs to me and cut, lumber for them. And it's worked out. I make a little extra money that way. I hunt. I fish, and that also supplements our food. But anyway, getting back to homesteading, you got to have shelter. You got to have, that's real important. Get your shelter up. If you can make a living on the side, work your jobs while you're young, and then put that money into the homestead, that's a good thing to do. And you can get your outbuildings up and everything, and that's what we did. We didn't have anything here, and, in that first 8 years, we built our outbuildings and our storage buildings, and gosh, I have buildings all over the property now, plus the house. And we did that. Then once I was retired, I didn't have to worry so much about, buying that material and stuff, and which some of it I made on the sawmill. But you get your shelter, you get set up so you can start gardening. You got to get a garden in. And that would be the next thing I would say would be a good idea. Get that garden in and start growing vegetables and start canning and learn how to do it. If you're not sure how, there's lots of websites on YouTube. Gosh, man, people teach you how to do anything from making moonshine to gardening and who knows, you know. This area where I live is in the Ozark Mountains in Arkansas. And we're about, closest town is 7 miles away. Closest big town is 17 miles away. And anyway, through the years, people have moved here that call themselves preppers. And we have a prepper. It's well known on YouTube in the area, who's a pistol packing preacher. And he's one of the nicest guys you ever met. And a group of his folks have moved in the area gradually, and we have several families that live in this area now that are preppers and semi-preppers, and you know, anyway. But they're all members of his group. And at first, I must admit, when they first started moving in, I was a little apprehensive about it because they all carried guns. And, you know, it was a little funny when somebody came up to the door to buy goat milk and say he's got a big old pistol on his side, because I don't carry a gun as a rule, but I've been thinking about doing it simply because of the way things are getting on this earth. You just never know. And anyway, we have preppers in the area. We have a family of 10 that lives nearby us, has 10 children, and boy, they're wonderful people. They moved here from I believe it was Montana, and he moved down here with his family, and his whole family lives here, and we've become friends, and we trade with each other and do favors for each other, and that's the way it is up here on the mountain. And almost every neighbor I have, I've either traded or done something for them, or they've done something for me in trade, and we do that a lot because there just isn't a lot of money amongst us. And we garden, we trade vegetables. I gave somebody some spaghetti squash the other day, and I'm in the process of giving some chickens away. Guy gave me some battery acid for some chickens not too long ago. And you know, like I say, we trade. If we've got farm implements that one person has and the other doesn't, we kind of let each other use them. And when the fence gets knocked down and maybe the person needs some help, we go and help them fix it. And I have a friend that lives nearby that he allows me to use his bull to breed with my cattle, and in payment for that, I gave him some lumber from my sawmill. So, you know, we don't use a lot of money here because we haven't got it, but we have other resources, and that's what we do. Again, with getting back, I guess, on can you homestead? It's tough. It's really tough. If you have some money, some resources that you can use to get started, that's great. That'll help you so much more. But if you don't, you can still do it. But keep in mind, if you've got a family, a big family and stuff, it's going to be a lot tougher. You all have to pitch in. And the biggest thing, like I said, is get that land, get that shelter, then you can start gardening, then you can start raising your animals. And if you do it right, you can actually make some money and food with them. There's many things you can do on the side. A lot of guys do construction projects and stuff. And, you know, if you've got any skills, you can put them to use to make you a little extra money. And, you know, it's all about survival. And a lot of folks are moving out in the country nowadays because they don't like the way the city is. And that's why my wife and I moved out here. We lived in the city, you know, but we've always liked the country. And we very rarely go into the city anymore because we just don't like the traffic and the people and the crowds, and good Lord, it's crazy, you know. But anyway, get out on that property. Go on YouTube. Many websites, many homesteaders that can teach you how to do things. You can dry your vegetables to store them. You can solar dry them. And I just started doing that myself recently, and it works pretty good, excuse me. And it's a good way to store vegetables. We can, you know, we freeze, and it's like my wife sometimes says we're afraid we're going to starve to death. and like I look at, Anyway, but as time goes by, it'll get easier for you. Just make sure you don't go in over your head, and it's going to be tough. There's a young man nearby here that just started out, and he's moved from, I believe he moved from Georgia, down there where they were having all the riots, those crazy people. And he moved here, and he's by himself, and he's starting all out. And he's one of those preppers that I was talking about. And he believes in God, and he believes in prepping. And he's a nice young man, and I think he's going to go far. He's looking for something that gives him peace, and I think he's found it. So that's part of living out in the country. It's completely different. You don't have the rat race. Kids grow up raising animals, feeding goats, feeding chickens, and, maybe riding an ATV out in the woods and learning how to hunt. It's a whole different lifestyle. But it's a peaceful lifestyle. And I think you can do it. I think if you're really willing to make the sacrifices you have to make, you can do it. And I wish good luck to you, and God bless. And thank you for watching my channel. Goodbye.